Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to my channel, Aristoria, back with me, Rehan Azrakim, and today we are going to discuss a new topic, and the topic is the study of translation and comparative literature. So let's start the discussion. Literary translation. Literary translation consists of the translation of poetry, plays, literary books, literary texts, as well as songs, rhymes, literary articles, fiction, novels, short stories, poems, and etc. Next one, language and culture translation. Literary translation includes translating novels, prose, plays, and poetry. A literary translator needs good insight into the cultural background and development of the source language. Since work of fiction often contain cultural reference, plays on word slang and reference to other words, rhythm and style are also even more important in literary text, and this type of translation is more like an art. Depending on the subject matter, a literary translator may encounter terms within a specific subject area. Translation of literary styles. Styles is the essential characteristic of every piece of writing. The outcome of the writer's personality and his emotion at the moment. A single paragraph can't be put together without revealing to some degree the personality of the author. Every writer has a literary style, and his style is reflected in his writing. Some authors say that a translation should reflect the style of the original text, while others say that a translation should possess the style of the translator. The literary translator has to take into account the beauty of the text, its style, the lexical, grammatical, and phonological features. Some of these may not be the same in the target language. For example, in the Arabic language, there is no you, which may be fundamental for a good translation. The aim of the translator is that the quality of the translation be the same as the original text without leaving out any of the content. In general, in literary translation, we translate messages, not meanings, and not meanings. The text must be seen as an integral and coherent piece of work. For example, if we are translating from Arabic into English or vice versa, we must take into account that the two realities are very different. Their cultures have sometimes opposite views on certain matters, as well as on scientific and technological development. So the search for equivalent words is more complex. So we know that translation of literature consists of poetry, prose, poems, plays, and any other literary works. So let's start with the first one, translation of poetry. In poetry, form is an essential to preserve as contents. If the form is not preserved, then neither is the poetry. The degree to which the translator reproduces the form, metra, rhythm, tone, register, etc. of the source language text will be as much determined by the target language system, and will also depend on the function of the translation. One of the more difficult things to translate is poetry. It is essential to maintain the flavor of the original text. Translation of prose and poems. Most translation authorities believe in some sort of stylistic loss in translating prose or poems. Let alone for rendering a poem into its equivalent verse, we must bear in mind that we should always be faithful to the meaning of the original poem. Next one is translation of plays. Words in the theater are to be recited, to be said on the stage, and that means a series of restrictions or general conditions to be taken into account: the year it was said and written, the style, the language, etc. The translator should say aloud the words that he is translating for a play to hear how they sound on stage. One thing is to read, and another is to say something. A text can be well translated in a book, but sounds awful on stage. The work of the translator does not end when the work is given to be performed. It is advisable for the translator to work with the director and the actor to resolve problems when the text is put on stage. There are 5 literary translation technique. First one is adaptation, second one linguistic amplification, third one compensation, the fourth one elision, and the last one is borrowing. Translation study is essential for comparative literature, as it is mentioned before, if translation studies wouldn't be dominant language such as English, French or Spanish would dominate other minor language, and there wouldn't be language diversity in the literature. By translating the work of Shakespeare, translator doesn't assimilate the language, but she or he broadens its fame. Through translation, people who speak minor languages understand other literatures. They can compare and contrast the other literatures and theirs. By saying the differences or similarities, they widen their perspective. They can produce different kind of work since they are interacting with the other literatures. Comparative literature as well as translation studies are disciplines that were inevitably based on hybridity and the crossing over of network. In that case, both of them are seen through the prism of cultural and linguistic interaction, or through the lenses of a theory of mobility specifically. The relationship between translation studies and comparative literature reveals the complexity and risk of such hybrid disciplines while emphasizing the importance of rethinking their identity and their specific features. And that's it, our discussion about the topic today. And see you again in another video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.